Hey, so I'm starting over. I'm not sure what happened on my previous video, but I wanted to jump on here this morning because I just had this wonderful conversation with another writer, and we were talking about structure and creativity, the creative process, and how all this works together when you're writing a business book. So I know we have this fantastic vision of how creatives work, just dumping your soul out onto a canvas or the stage, or singing from deep within yourself, all of these very deep, passionate ideas when it comes to how a creative functions. But we also have structure. And if we don't have any sort of structure, then it makes it very difficult for us to actually get anything done. So what do I mean by that? Um, Whenever I'm working with people in my writing course, I have a structure, an entire structure from, the seed of an idea all the way through the end of your book, right? You've got that main part that we focus on, but there's also structure before that. There's all the stuff we think about before we start writing a book. There is contacts with your editor, contacts with your cover designer. There is contact with a publicist, or maybe with somebody to help you with your marketing, because you have to think about the stuff that happens after your book too. And there's structure to all of that. But within that structure, you have your creativity. And we talked a little bit about this conversation I had the other day. So I'm going to be bringing in some of the stuff that's been popping up in my life lately. I had a conversation the other day with a lady who is a fiction writer. And she was telling me that the way creativity happens in her life does not work for her. It does not work for her husband. It doesn't work for her kids. So it's not working. It's not functioning in her life. The way it happens with her is she gets this, like, I have to create kind of moment where she has to sit down at her desk and write and write and write. And she just spills it all out, gets it all out on the page. And someone actually has to come in and say, look, you haven't left your office for 2 days. Go shower, go eat something. You know, this is not a healthy thing to have happen, right? And I think it's amazing that she has this, this drive, this desire. And I am impressed by the fact that she can sit at her desk for that long and not eat. I would not last that long. I have to eat. So, but clearly this is not working for her. That was the point. This is not structure. This is letting your creativity control you. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work for anybody. It means that, her kids are sitting there going, okay, when's mommy going to come out and give me a hug, help me with my homework, whatever. Her husband's saying the same thing, like, hey, we have responsibilities here. I'm doing this and this, and I need you as my partner to be out here helping me with this. And I think it's important that she does get that creativity out, but it's also important to do all the other things in your life that you've signed up for, right? So the reason I set up all of this structure in my course is so you actually can look at it and say, yes, there is a creative component, and I'm bringing that to my book, but there's also structure. We also have to set up an outline for our books. We also have to figure out who we're writing for. We also have to figure out what we're going to do with the books at the end. Are we going to be selling them when we are doing a speaking event? Is this something that we are using as the low end, low cost item to get people into our sales funnel and help people get to know us better so that they will want to do coaching with us? Because there has to be that structure for you to actually get through the book that you're writing, right? If you don't have that structure, then you're going to get lost in the creative process. And that's something that is fun. Yes, it is fun, but you also have to say, all right, I need to come out of this rabbit hole I just went down on looking up this one thing. I have to come out of this rabbit hole. I have to stop working on this chapter talking about development. I can't just keep doing this. I have to move on to the next chapter. I have to actually complete the book and get it out. So I want to give you some insight into how a creative person because everybody is actually a creative person, just some people identify more with that than others. How somebody who's writing like a fiction work works. If you walked in their office, you would see, chances are, some board or you know, a bunch of post-it notes with strings. They actually map everything out ahead of time. So this isn't something that is foreign to creatives. It's something that every successful writer, you know, somebody who has actually written a book and gotten clear to the end, they have actually planned it out. They've actually sat down and said, all right, who's reading this? What do I want to do? What's common in this genre? How am I going to get all of this stuff in this amount of time? What's going to keep it interesting? What's the structure of my book? That's what they're doing. They sit down and they decide the structure of their book because they want to be successful and they want to get it done. So I've taken that same sort of process and used that in Brilliant Business Book Intensive because it's so important to have structure, right? You know, these are things that I learned myself. When I first started writing books, I did the whole sit down at your desk and dump everything out because you're absolutely possessed with needing to write. And I didn't keep much of what I wrote. It did not turn out well. And I was trying to come up with other things on the side, like, okay, well, why would this happen? What would I do with this? Who wants to read this? Who am I even talking to here? There were things that I let my creativity take a hold of me and try to develop the structure. And creativity does not develop good structure. You have to do that structure. We also talked a little bit about the fact that you know, there is some intuition to this. You have to trust your intuition. So even if you have structure that like I give you, you have to look at it and say, all right, what parts of this work for me and what parts don't work for me? Because sometimes, you know, you need a ton of structure and sometimes you only need a little bit to get you to the jumping off point. Whenever I do work with people, I make suggestions for how they can lay out their chapters. But that's not a concrete thing that you have to sit there and say, yes, I did this part and this part and this part and this part. Like there are certain things that you want to see. A pattern is nice, but if that doesn't resonate with you, then that's absolutely something that isn't going to work for you. That can't be your structure if you're fighting against it, right? So you have to use your intuition to develop the structure. And you can't let your creativity take over and take control of that structure. So we actually talked a little bit about how you can invite in your creativity. And I think that structure piece is so important for this because when you do say, okay, I'm going to sit down at 2 o'clock this afternoon, you know, my kids are still at school or my kids are asleep or I just got home from work and this is a good time for me to relax and go ahead and work on this. You can invite in that creativity without forcing it. So if there are certain things that you know, hey, I start getting kind of creative, I start dreaming, I start, you know, getting empowered at this time of the day, then this is the time to do it. So you want to set up your structure around that. What environment do you want to be in? Do you need to meditate first? Do you need to go for a run first? Do you like listening to some energizing music to kind of get you into that headspace? You can cultivate that creativity and you can invite it in. You don't have to wait for it to knock on the door and surprise you, right? So just a lot of thoughts that I wanted to get out there, you know, thinking about creating that structure, inviting creativity in, and, you know, really cultivating an environment that is going to be rich for you to sit down, write your book, and actually get it done. Because if your book's in here, you can't do anything with it, right? It needs to be out of your head, on paper, published, and in the hands of those ideal clients. So lots of stuff to think about today. If you have comments, I would love to hear them. Just pop them in the comment feed and I would be happy to answer them. But I think, you know, the structure and intuition and inviting creativity in was just so important to talk about today. So have a good day and go write your book.